Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to the Flower Lounge Podcast. I'm really excited to have this guest here. I'm so excited to have this guest here, and I can't wait for this conversation. I know you're going to love it. I want to welcome Dr. Rose Kumar. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I have some bullet points that I pulled out of your book that I thought were so fascinating. And I know we also want to talk about the four-body system. But before we get into all the juiciness, maybe if you want to just give us a quick, for the listeners who aren't familiar with you and your work yet, sort of like a story on how you got to where you are now.
I could talk for hours about that, but I'll give you 5 minutes. So I am a MD, a physician who trained in traditional medicine. And this is my vocation. I came in at 2 years old saying I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. But as my spiritual journey unfolded, which started when I was born, I became really aware that I'm an extremely sensitive person. And as I went through my training in medicine, I really enjoyed the conventionality of it, the traditional aspects of it, but I always felt like there's something more. There's something more that people are requiring, that are needing for healing, that is not being addressed by the way I was being trained. And so I became a really good technician with these questions about what brought you here and why do you have these symptoms? Do you have any idea where these came from? And 9 times out of 10, people knew why they were sick. Why, because intuitively, we all have an inner wisdom that nobody asks us about. And once you ask people, why do you think you have depression, or why do you think you had a heart attack, or why do you think you have breast cancer? People will tell you exactly why they have it or had it. Wow. And so the inner wisdom informs us when we ask the question. And so it became very much like a basis of how I wanted to practice medicine. And I wanted to learn what is at the root of this, and how is an illness healing for us, and what is the body trying to do to detoxify us by getting sick, or informing us by getting sick. And so that really began my journey through medical school, through my training, and after. And I couldn't really find a place for myself within the current healthcare system because it was very corporatized. It was very profit-driven. I didn't have time to ask the questions. It was just, prescribe. And that's fine, but it's too limited, and it's too palliative, and it's not really fulfilling enough. So about 22 years ago, I left corporate medicine and decided to create the Ommani Center, which appeared to me in a vision. The name and all. And so I basically allowed it to be formed. I was led, and you know what I'm talking about, Katie, because this is how your journey began as well. I wanted to help people. I wanted to bring the feminine into healthcare. I wanted to get to the root of illness. I wanted to be authentic as a physician, a healer, and a partner in people's healing process. And so so the Ommani Center was built in 2001. It opened its doors then. And, I thought, oh, here we are. I'm going to be great. And I went through some very brutal initiations in the center, including a divorce and lots of betrayal and et cetera. And so the doors opened in 2001. In 2005, my life as I knew it was over. My marriage was in shambles. My husband betrayed me horribly and unprofessionally. And, my daughter was not taking it well. And she kind of, her journey was very, very difficult. And so I was kind of left with a life that that I didn't recognize. And I asked myself, how did I let this happen? I mean, I'm a smart person and I'm a heartful person. So how did I let this happen to my life? And the answer for that appeared in this book that I wrote. I mean, I was like ordered to write this book from my higher self. And so I would have to wake up every morning and answer that question. How did I let this happen? And so I learned a lot about suffering and struggle and transformation and the larger context. And at the time, I felt really deeply that I was being asked by the vision of my purpose to prove my authenticity, to prove that I could carry this vision, that I could actually work with people from a place that truly understood through experience, what it's like to go through transformation of this magnitude, what midlife is like, what to offer them in terms of modalities, in terms of ways that they can start exploring the larger meaning, the larger context of who they are, and how to heal themselves, how to follow that inner light, that inner guidance, how to transform the shadow. So it's, as you can see, it was really a leading into process for me. And so here I am now, in 2020, in conversation with you, because I discovered your remedies, and they're incredibly, incredibly helpful in this transformational process. So that's the 5-minute version.
That's so awesome. And then just out of curiosity's sake, and because we have a lot of listeners who enjoy flower essences, can you talk a little bit about this kind of like wild, I don't know, I see it as wild, like blossoming flower essence world in your already super successful practice?
Mm-hmm. Well, I first was introduced to flower essences when I was going through my divorce. I knew nothing about them.
Wow.
And I was in such shock at the betrayal, the levels of betrayal that I experienced, that my body was shaking all the time. I mean, it was really a nervous system was jangled. And a friend of mine said, you should call this flower essence therapist, and she's highly intuitive, and she would really be able to help you, because I couldn't take any time off work. I had to keep my business going, my business alive, my patients cared for, etc. So I called her, and she did an intuitive reading, and she basically gave me, I think, 30 essences to take.
Wow.
30. So she said, make your own tinctures with these essences, and 10 drops of this and 5 drops of that. And, so at that point, I didn't really have the brain to ask her why and I just listened because I was led to her. So I started taking that, and, I tend to get, as a physician, one of the shadow aspects of a physician is you tend to get very analytical. So I didn't want to, analyze what she was telling me. I just wanted to trust that what she was saying was going to help me. And so I did everything she told me to do exactly the way she told me. And I felt better, and I felt more grounded, more aligned. And I became more and more curious as time went on. I would talk to her like once a week or once every 2 weeks, and she would tweak things, and she was able to really assist in the realignment process. And so when I was writing my book and I wrote about the 4-body system, I said to her, Diane, you have to explain to me how these work, because I want to write about these, because I have had so much success personally in how these essences have grounded me and reconnected me back to myself. And I've sent a lot of patients to her, and, she's helped them as well through shock and trauma and midlife crisis. I just want to understand how they work. And she was very gracious in helping me understand it. And it just made sense. For me, it was like a no-brainer. It made total sense to me. And so that's when this journey began for me. And it hasn't stopped. It's just evolving. So, so she helped me with Bach and Perelandra flower essences, and they were very useful. I still use them with myself, my animals, but this is something of a different caliber, what you're doing. And how I've experienced these both for myself and my patients, the LOTUSWEI essences.
And you're just like intuitively allowing yourself to intuitively connect your patients with the right remedies.
Yes. I mean, it's so interesting. Like I'll be with a patient and then all of a sudden the remedy will tell me, you need to tell her about this remedy and go get it and see if she, yeah. So I get the tester in the exam room and I put a little drop of the oil, or I missed her or him. And there was a bird that just flew into the window here.
Oh, wow.
Finch. And then they let me know, which one resonates with them. And then it goes home with them.
Your patients that's such a cool experience to be seeing your doctor and have that sort of sensitivity brought into the room. I know that you're focused on so many things like food and nutrition and lifestyle. I mean, your patients must just love you and stay with you forever. I would never go to another doctor.
They do, and the feeling's mutual. I mean, this is a community which is what I believe medicine should be. It's an educational relationship community. I have a toolbox. I can educate my patients. And for me, the exciting part is if I can impart some knowledge to my patients about how their body works and how to be empowered and consciously know how to take care of themselves, then we're working as a team. It's not me telling them what to do. It's them being empowered to become conscious. And, I'm fortunate in that the vision draws in people that want to heal. They are seekers. Maybe I'm getting like a very small percentage of, the 1%. Most of my patients are ultra sensitives and, they don't fit into that system. They don't fit into here's my hammer and you're a nail system, So, for them, they want to understand, what is their relationship with the world and themselves, and why don't I love myself, and why can't I nourish myself, and why can't I, why do I just trance out?
How important is asking those questions in order to really get to the root cause of what's causing physical symptomology or dis-ease?
Mm-hmm. How important are the questions? They're everything. Because the questions then mirror back to the person, the patient, the client, so that they can self-reflect. And that's where that inner wisdom comes in. And then something comes out like, I had this trauma this long ago, and this is, ever since then, I haven't been right, or this happened to me. And then there's an emotion that comes up, and you just know that this is like trapped in their bodies and is looking for a way to heal or transform. And so that's how powerful these questions are.
So for somebody who's out there listening and they have this physical thing that's been going on, it's chronic, or it's just came up recently, what kind of questions would you tell them to ask themselves? And or is it more powerful when a third party asks you, when someone else asks you?
I think a lot of times the someone else, if they can hold a clear space for you, no matter who the healer is or what modality, there's something about being witnessed when you connect to that part of yourself that's very powerful by another person, a clear witness, because how many of us have that? So that's very powerful. I think the other thing, especially in women, what we do is if we ask ourselves that question and an answer arises, we immediately second guess it. So it's really important, I think, to have that other person, either ask it or be present when it's asked, so that there's this mirroring back and this validation and this holding of a person's being as they're coming into this understanding of where did this come from? When did this start? What was associated with the symptom showing up in my life?
And do you find that when we ask ourselves those questions, that oftentimes just the acknowledging of what contributes or has contributed, that alone is enough to start the unwinding of the actual physical issue?
Absolutely. It's like a door opens. And then, see, I kind of feel like what I do with my patients is just facilitate the opening of the door. And then it's the whole healing process is much greater than me. And everybody's healing process is different. Like, say I see four women with breast cancer. There's a similarity in the matrix, the pattern underneath the breast cancer, but the stories are all different. The genetic lineage is different. The diets are different. So there's no one size fits all. So if I can hold the matrix for them, and a knowing of this, these are some of the issues that women get with breast cancer. Now, how did I learn that? From my patients. They taught me. So patterns that I've collected over the years from tens of thousands of patients have informed me of, I hold the questions. So I will say to a woman, for example, one of the emotional patterns underneath breast cancer is depletion. Your breasts are organs of nurturing. And if you don't know how to nourish yourself, you're going to get depleted. And that's going to affect your heart center. It'll affect your breasts. So the body is a symbolic physical entity that has inner wisdom. And so what does this mean for you? Like how did you get depleted? And probably 10 times out of 10, they will know. This is what happened, and this is how it started, and this is my pattern, and this is what I do. And then shame comes up, oh, I did this to myself. But it's really not about that. It's really about, us learning from how the body's responding. Is this working? Is this not working? And, the body's telling you, this doesn't work for me. Like I saw a patient of mine today that has hypertension. I mean, she called me this morning at 4:45 and said, my blood pressure is skyrocketing. I've been anxious. I don't know what to do. And so she came in to see me today, and we talked about, what is going on? What is the pattern in your life right now that is causing your body to respond this way? So she was given medication, and we uncovered it. We uncovered this pattern. And then she was sent to the appropriate therapist to undo that pattern, because that pattern is no longer working for her. And her body gave her a signal and said, you can do this, but I can't be treated this way. And she was just, she's wants to work out and pushes herself. And she's like, extremely, I would say, addicted to the external persona. And so the amount of pushing that was going on to the body had to stop. And so, so we talked about that how the external persona is really, meaningless to the soul, to your body. It doesn't care. It just wants you to be balanced. It wants you to heal. It wants you to take care of it. It wants you to nourish yourself. So if you push yourself and push yourself and push yourself, your body's going to respond in this way. Your adrenaline is off the wall. Your body is giving you a signal. So you have to listen to this. So yeah, I'll manage your blood pressure with medication because I have to, because that's what medications are good for. But then there's this whole other level that requires transformation. And that's where the root cause, the healing work is.
So when you see, like with this particular patient, let's say on the other side of this pattern work, and she unravels this pattern and becomes more able to accept and allow and receive nourishment, then do you find that the physical issue unravels and you can take her off the medication?
Yeah, absolutely. And that happens all the time in my practice. So sometimes it takes a while because these are entrenched patterns that have inertia, that are supported by our external society. It's a lot of it is about persona. A lot of it is about the values that society, emulates and upholds. Those values don't work for the inner self. It could care less about, fame and prestige and status and money. The inner self doesn't care. The inner self just wants alignment and healing and, those universal truths that are so hard to live by in this world. So I feel that tension, and in midlife, that gets even more taught because the tension between the ego and the self becomes more and more and more intense as we age, because the inner self is calling us in and wants us to align with it. And then the ego says, oh, but you can't do that. And it makes excuses. So, so I think we really need that reminder and that assistance from nature to soften that compensated self and to become more aligned with our inner wisdom and our intuition and our instinct and the things that nourish us, the behaviors that nourish us.
You say something in your book about the importance of alignment versus like getting over something. Mm-hmm. Like, I just need to get over this. Can you talk a little bit about how, and we can circle back around to the 4 bodies too, but can you talk a little bit about what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? If there's anyone out there who's like experiencing a great emotional challenge, what does that look like to, instead of just get over it, to align with your inner self?
So I think that, the emotional body, and when we talk about the 4 body system, I think it'll come together for everybody, what I'm saying. So the emotional body, it's a part of us that's invisible, but it's felt. And it's really, and it's part of the feminine principle. So what I say is, what I feel is that our emotional body is the connection between ourself, us, and ourselves. So the authentic self connects to us through the emotional body. It signals us, this is what's coming up for you. How many times have you gone into a room with a bunch of people and there was just a fight and you can feel it? It's like, oh, I can feel something was not right here. And then we say, oh, I need to just ignore that. Or a person, you go through a loss and these intense emotions come up and you push them down, or you go to your doctor and say, I'm really grieving, and they call it depression and medicate you. So, so there's a resistance against feeling in our society, where part of the script that we're taught is if an emotion comes up, we have to get over it because feeling it is unsafe, or feeling it is not okay, or another person gets uncomfortable when we're experiencing an intense emotion. So a lot of those emotions go into the shadow. They go into the underworld of our being, and they just sit there until you go through midlife. And then they all rise up and say, hey, I'm here. Look, you ignored me. And so getting over an experience is really, it's faulty logic. It doesn't work for the emotional body because emotions don't go away. They just fester, or they compartmentalize, and then they get amplified. They build steam over time. And so I think it's a mistake, or it's an aberration in our society that we don't have the courage to be with ourselves, be with others who are experiencing intense emotions of any sort, except anger. Anger is accepted in our society. That's accepted. We see that on TV, we see that in movies, we see that on the street, we see that in traffic. Anger, people can express anger, no problem. But if a person expressed their grief, forget it. You got to get over it. So it's, we're selective as to what is acceptable in our society emotionally. It's so interesting to me that, women, we are emotional beings. And so if we say we have to get over how we feel, we're basically denying ourselves. We're out of alignment with who we are as basic organisms. So we can't be healthy if we can continue to push down how we feel. Our feelings are informing us. They're informing the world. What the heck is going on here in this world? Our feelings tell us. What's that saying? If you're upset, you are asleep. So they inform us that something's not right. So I hope that I answered your question.
Yeah, let's dive into the 4 body systems.
Okay, so I want to actually just show a slide.
Yeah.
And I think that'll help clarify for our audience what the 4 body system is. So just bear with me for 1 second here. So this is my buddy Albert Einstein, and he has a really interesting formula that he came up with, that energy and matter are equivalent. So having said that, that basically means c squared is the speed of light, and that's squared the speed of light. So energy and matter are the same, except matter is more dense and the energy is less dense. So how I practice is I kind of see, so if we look at the body if we look at water, for example, the molecule of water is H2O, and water has 3 different consistencies. It's got ice, it's water, it's steam. So if you kind of look at water that way, it's still water, but it has 3 different densities. And so in the same way, our body, the energy body, is the least dense. So and it's actually the largest around us. Our energy body can be measured by a galvanometer. Electricity can be measured outside of our energy body 8 feet out. And 8 feet out, you can actually measure the electrical current that your body is emanating. That's why when you walk into a room and you can feel something happened, that energy is actually received by your energy, and it informs you that something's off, something's not right. So the energy body is the least dense, most wide body that you are actually surrounded by and in. It's in you and it's around you. The emotional body that we just talked about is less dense than the energy body, or actually I should say more dense than the energy body. So the emotional body is a denser body. There's more feeling to it. You can tell, when your emotions rise up, you can feel them. The energy body is more subtle. You're less able to kind of feel it per se. You can sense it, but the feeling is different in the emotional body. So the emotional body is more dense. And then we have the mental body, which is the psyche, which is, the rational thinking, the thinking mind, that is even more dense. And the mental body, the physical body is the most dense. So our physical body is a responder. It responds to the energy body, the emotional body, the mental body. And so if you ask a woman who's had, say, breast cancer, where did the cancer come from? And they say, well, I went through this horrific loss and I tried to get over it, but I couldn't get over it. And I couldn't sleep at night. I was depressed. I was grieving. And boom, all of a sudden, the breast cancer shows up. What is that? What is happening here? So she just went back over to the time when something happened and she, did not have the support, or she didn't know how to work through it or address it. And it just materialized into the physical body. And so the physical body carries the energetic and the emotional memory in it and then manifests. And then what we do in medicine is we say, we'll cut it out and we'll blast it, and then you can go along your way and then, wait for a recurrence or not. It's not really a great way to live because you're not really living from a place of meaning. and you're not really seeking the answers and the root causes of where did this come from? Because if I understand where it came from, I'm being called to transform something. And if I transform it, I don't need to get a cancer recurrence. I don't, it changes the energetic and the emotional body, which then changes the physical body.
Right.
So it's really not a approach that our medical system operates from. The medical system only operates from the physical body at a molecular level, and it's one size fits all. So that doesn't really work well to heal people. It may cover the symptom for a while, but there's no healing in that. So I hope, does that clarify?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man. I'm just amazed that I know MDs. I know a handful of MDs who got through schooling like you and yet kept this really wide perspective. I think it's really precious.
I think that what we're observing in our world today is a breakdown of the limited medical system, where it's only going to be, I think that the minority of us that are carrying this vision, this larger vision for healing, are hopefully going to be the norm someday, because I think that's what our society, the world deserves. And because just get over it and cover it up and slap it down, it doesn't work. This is not what we're here for. Yeah. We're not skipping stones on earth.
Yeah, in your book, and I'm just going to, for those of you who are watching, I'm going to show this. You have it in your background too, but Rose has a book called Becoming Real. What a great title. Becoming Real, Reclaiming Your Health in Midlife. And whether or not you're in midlife or not, it's still an amazing read. And if you are in midlife, then you should have it on your shelf for sure. And I wanted to bring up something that you mentioned in there about referring to what you were talking about as well around the medical system. You say closed system, mm-hmm. an open system. You talk about asking questions and curiosity. And then you say resistance to a closed system is self-love. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. So resisting a closed system. So a closed system is, a closed system is not interested in change. It's not interested in transformation. It's not interested in expansion. It's interested in its own agenda, in the status quo. Families do this all the time. For example, alcoholic families are closed systems. They do not want to be exposed themselves. They do not want to be seen. Most families don't want their shadow exposed. So people are assigned, positions in families, and you better, live your position, and you better not tell anybody what's going on behind closed doors or else. That's a closed system. The medical system is no different. If you go outside of the boundaries of molecular biology or Cartesian theory, where everything is cut down into its component parts, and then you prescribe big pharma for that, if you go beyond that, you are punished. And you are told to leave because you're not, obeying the protocols. So if you are not obeying the protocols, you are betraying yourself. If you are obeying the protocols, you're betraying yourself, because if those protocols are toxic to your patients, if you've seen that those protocols are harmful and you're still doing it because that's how you're going to get paid, that is a closed system. And then it takes its toll on you. And it's taking its toll on a lot of physicians who are burning out and who have a conflict, an inner conflict, a conflict of interest. They go home, they drink, they take drugs, and the drug abuse and alcoholism rate amongst physicians is skyrocketing. Depression is skyrocketing. Suicide is skyrocketing. It's 400 times the national average in healthcare, suicide. Wow. So there's a massive lack of meaning when we work within a closed system. And so we have to kind of cut ourselves off from, I call it self-love or self-nourishment or authenticity or self-alignment, in order to keep the closed system going. So, when you stop cooperating with that, which is a resistance, it's like the Gandhiism, non-violent non-cooperation. there is a movement, it's like the conscientious objector, it's the same principle where you just say, I just can't participate. I cannot participate. And you've resisted against this closed system mentality, and you've taken a step into yourself. And it's lonely there because the system is big and you're your little self saying, I cannot participate. So there are consequences. And one of the consequences is you're alone out there, in the middle of the ocean going, oh my God, it's little old me against this big system that has all this inertia. How am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And it takes a lot of, patience and time and self-compassion and courage to stay there and to say, I can't support, this closed system thinking that if I have a conflict of inside of me that this thing is harmful, that I can't say anything to anybody, that I can't do what I feel is best for my patient. One of the physicians who I see, who's a patient of mine, was telling me that a patient came in. This is a very minor thing, but it just demonstrates what we're saying. Patient came in with very slightly elevated cholesterol, like 220. And he said to the patient, what are you eating and lifestyle, and suggested to the patient to alter their lifestyle and, go more plant-based. And then, we'll recheck your cholesterol in 3 months. Well, the administrator of this particular employed physician was tracking the diagnosis codes and whether pharmaceuticals were prescribed. And he got called into the administrator's office and said, why didn't you prescribe a statin for this patient? And the physician said, well, this patient his lifestyle is clearly causing his elevated cholesterol. And the administrator said, this is your warning. If you do this again, you're out.
No way.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So this goes on all over the place in healthcare.
Is it because the organization gets kickbacks from the drug companies, or why would there be such a strong commitment to that as the only means to treat it?
Well, there's subsidies that pharmaceutical companies give hospitals. And if you're an employed physician by a hospital system, which I personally think is a conflict of interest, if you're employed by a hospital system, you've got to toe the line. Wow. So that's a closed system.
Okay, so let me just break this down so to make sure I totally understand what you're saying and that the listeners totally understand what you're saying. You're saying that our current medical system, the way it is, hospitals, so to speak, they are subsidized by pharmaceutical companies. And therefore, in some situations, the doctors must prescribe medications, even if that's not what they think is best for their patients.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
I think if more people knew that, they would do more self-education around medications and side effects and natural remedies, right?
Here's what we have, though. Patients are afraid. You go in with a symptom, you're afraid. Right. And you trust your physician. And this was never this way in medicine. I mean, when I had my training, it wasn't this way. We didn't have layers of administrators tracking everything. Wow. We just didn't have a system like that. Physicians were sort of the healer, the person who you trusted. There was no conflict of interest 34 years ago in medicine. I mean, physicians were very conscientious, and hospitals were not hiring physicians at that time. Most physicians had private practices back then. And so as hospitals started gobbling up private practices and, giving big salaries and having physicians work for them as employees, then the physician is an employee of the hospital and has to follow the hospital rules. So it's altered. And most physicians that go into medicine go in to help their patients. They don't anticipate that they won't have the freedom. They don't anticipate that, and it becomes a huge conflict for them. And so a lot of the issues that physicians are suffering from right now are due to their own conflict, their conscience. Because they have a conscience, they're having a hard time with the way the system is expecting them to behave with their patients. And it's brutal. It's a it's a brutal schedule. It's very production line kind of a schedule where if you spend more time, your light goes off and it just tells you it's time to get out. It's time for the next patient. So it's not really relationship friendly. It's not healing friendly. And I think that, more and more physicians are recognizing that this is toxic for their health. It's toxic for their vocation, for why they went into medicine. And so we're in a transformational process where things are going to have to shift because this is not sustainable.
And you having had so much experience with a thriving private practice, what would you say to doctors or even nurse practitioners who are kind of stuck in a spot in terms of going it on your own and the freedom that lies on the other side of taking that risk?
I think, for me, it was an issue of really evaluating, is a really big inflated salary worth selling my soul for? Because they are going to make a lot more money being employees of that system, but then we pay a price. So what is the measure of meaning for you? And that's a personal question for everybody. And for me, I was willing to do whatever it took. I was willing to not have a salary. I was willing to, make the sacrifices, material sacrifices necessary. And I've done that. And so I make a reasonable salary. My colleagues in the hospital system would probably laugh at my salary, but it's enough for sustaining my life. And I have a fairly large overhead, but I'm in no debt. And I live a simple, sustainable life and with a lot of meaning. And so for me, the measure was what do I want? Do I want a lot of money or do I want meaning? So I can have, a moderate amount of money to be able to pay my bills and have some security, which I do. But I have a clear conscience and an alignment with myself.
That feels priceless.
It's priceless. You cannot measure that with money. So I think that, one of the issues that because of where healthcare is today and how the insurance industry is breaking down and how the healthcare industry is breaking down, I think physicians have to ask themselves, how much is enough? And, how am I willing to practice? And how many patients a day am I willing to see? And what makes sense to me? So I think that, if we can get off that external value system and start to look at the reasonableness of what our values are and measure our values, because I'm a very smart business person and I'm not like, loosey-goosey when it comes to business. I'm pretty good as a business owner, but I'm not going to sacrifice my time with my patients or use my patients to get rich. I want to be able to sustain my practice and pay my employees well and pay myself a reasonable amount so that I can, live simply and comfortably and sustainably. I mean, how much is that? That's different for every person. So again, it's a personal issue. And so those are the questions that physicians are going to have to ask themselves, or nurse practitioners are going to have to ask themselves, because it's a big shock when you leave that system and you have to shift your standard a little bit and say, wow, because what are you going to do with the money? Buy more stuff? I mean, who wants all that stuff? So I think that it's really an issue of value. What do you value? And is it worth it to you? I personally think that it's always a good idea to work for that system for a while so that you can really feel what it's like to compromise yourself.
Oh my God.
And then once you leave, I thank myself every day for stepping out of there. I mean, I am so grateful that I do not work that way anymore. I mean, I never did. I was always the trouble child, the troublemaker in the system.
The black sheep.
But I'm sure they were happy to have me leave. But it's every day I just enjoy being with my patients and watching them, clapping for them and cheering for them and loving them and taking them off their meds or putting them on their meds and assuring them. And I mean, it's sacred. It's a sacred life.
And I feel like just listening to you talk, it's like so exponential too. I mean, it's like you're talking about you making the sacrifice of a bunch of money and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like on the flip side, besides being able to create a successful business and center and community, it's like exponential. Like how many people have you seen in the last 20 years and they've had children, right? You've seen like generations and life cycles and it's exponential.
Yeah. I mean, I have patients whose pregnancy test I did, whose kids are now in college.
So sweet.
And we still talk about, do you remember when you came in and we did this pregnancy test? And I remember that. And I remember when you brought your baby in and, oh my God, he's 6 feet tall now. And where did the time go? And it's like being a midwife, midwifing them through these stages of life. And it's like, wow, I'm 22 years into this. And, we've been together for this long of a time. And I've witnessed what you've done with yourself in this time. And I mean, how do you put a price tag on that? I mean, this is like, these are real relationships of value and just the sacredness and the witnessing. And they watched me go through my divorce. I mean, these people watched what happened to me and learned from my process, and I learned from their process. And I mean, it was a very transparent process of going through that transformation. I didn't take any drugs. I took flower essences, but I didn't take any meds, going through that grief. They watched me. I mean, I didn't look too good through my divorce, through the betrayal. I did not look good. And, they came in to see me and I offered them my medicine, but they also offered me their support.
Wow.
We're here for you. You can do that.
So human.
Very human and very humbling. Very humbling.
I don't know. I feel like I'd be so inspired if I had a doctor like you and I saw you just being real and living life and being authentic. I would trust you 5,000 times more.
Thank you. I just think that everyone deserves that, and my patients have been my greatest teachers. What I've witnessed them go through and the courage that they've gone through so much trauma with, it's like, I mean, I'm just blown away. It just really, they've been my mentors. I've been their mentor. We create this community of love and support and knowledge and empowerment and resilience. And I mean, it's very rich.
Wow. We should be giving talks to doctors and nurses. It just seems like if
that's meant to be, I think it's gonna come my way. I would love to.
Okay. And then just talking about your team a little bit, because I mean, when I look at the Ommani Center and I think, what a dream come true if I were a patient client. I'm looking at it going, oh my God, what do you not have? Like everything I could ever want or dream of is there at that center. And then you're also collaborating business-wise because you've got a pool of how many people's different clients and you're, helping each other and referring. And what does that feel like to then not be necessarily alone, but you're in this like little micro community of practitioners who are helping each other?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the aloneness as a physician, there's always the, I love my practitioners and we interface, but if I have, it's like, acupuncturists have their club and medical doctors have their club, and there's an understanding. We've gone through the trenches together and all of that. I don't have any of that with colleagues. So my colleagues are patients that show up, MDs that show up to see me for healing or for, their anxiety or their stress or what have you. But in terms of like a colleague that says, hey, Rose, what do you think of this? Or what do you think, I have this difficult case and I'd like to talk to you about it. I don't have any of that. I mean, they just look at me and they go, oh my God, what's with her? She's not part of our closed system. She's not part of the club. Wow. So that loneliness, I think, is always there. And yet you have to decide, what are you willing to live with? So I'm willing to live with the loneliness in order to do this work that's sacred. And I have a relationship with it that is quite interesting now, because I've had it my whole career, where I'm sort of not part of the club. I'm not part of it, because you can't have it both ways. I can't have colleagues and not be part of the closed system. But the practitioners and us I have this collaborative, loving, respectful relationship with one another, and we teach each other. We have meetings once a month and we present our patients, and so a lot of patients are seeing multiple practitioners, and so we get different angles of the different levels of the four body system and how the healing process is occurring at this level. And this is what happened to her because I was able to get her off this med because the homeopathy worked here. It's very exciting and awe-inspiring to be open to and to interface with practitioners that are really good at their craft and can educate me and teach me and humble me that, that prescription is not it. That deeper work that's happening will help me remove that prescription safely. So it's really fascinating. I mean, my community of patients has learned so much from seeing it's a community of consciousness where we're all learning from one another. And yet, I think I'm very good at what I do in medicine. My homeopath he's top class at what he does with homeopathy. And Dave has been with me for, since Ommani opened and has healed thousands of people. And I have just been in awe of his humbleness and also his incredible intuition and expertise in homeopathy. He's writing books in homeopathy. He's a teacher in homeopathy, etc. So it's really been this. I think our patients are very fortunate to have this kind of a collaborative group that is so respectful of one another and certainly of the patient.
Okay, so if doctors wanted to leave the system, I mean, it's simple, right? It's like having your own business and you get malpractice insurance and you have to find your clients and patients and you have to take insurance, right?
I don't take insurance.
You don't take insurance?
No. Insurance is a
closed system.
It's very difficult to survive, to pay your overhead with where insurance is now. I took insurance until 2 years ago, and then I dropped it because the policies were changing and their reimbursements were dropping. And you have to fight to get paid. You have to hire like 3 levels of staff in order to get your CPT codes right and your diagnostic codes right and get reimbursed, 70% of what you're billing and on and on and on. And when you're working, integratively, or when you're working, spend 45 minutes with a patient, you're not going to get reimbursed for 45 minutes. You'll get $20 or $40. And, that's just, you can't pay your bills with that. So what I did is when I went cash, I looked at what cash practices were charging, what was a nurse practitioner charging? What was a physician charging? And I came up with a reasonable charge that was lower than all of that, because I think people deserve to be able to afford good care. And so I came up with a price that was affordable for most, and that I felt was respectful of my time and expertise. So, and so didn't skip a beat. I mean, I had some attrition of patients, but then others came in. And so it's really been a good thing because of, I think, where insurance is headed now. Most people are paying anyways, even though they have insurance, because most people have high deductibles. So when they go to see their primary care physician, they'll get a $600 bill. And they'll say it's under your insurance, but the patient has to pay.
What's the point of having insurance, right?
Well, the point is, if you have a catastrophic injury, then you're covered after the first $5,000 or $10,000. You don't go bankrupt.
Yeah. And so you could so like what I do is I have this insurance that's emergency only. If I get hit by a bus and I get dropped off at the ER.
Yeah.
And then other than that, everything's just paid out of pocket, because that's when you need it. Mm-hmm. And it's preventative.
Exactly.
And that's like paying health insurance.
That's exactly.
But you get something in return for it.
Yeah. You get health in return for it. So you don't have to use your insurance. Right. So that's exactly it. I mean, it's like a patient will see me, a year's worth of like a new patient visit and 2 follow-ups would cost them about $750, maybe $1,000, maybe. So how much are they paying per month for insurance in order to have insurance coverage? So if you want everything covered, you're paying at least $1,000 a month. So if you have a major medical policy, you probably pay something like anywhere from $200 to $300 a month, but then you're saving on the back end and you're spending a lot less money out of pocket to see your primary care physician for prevention. And so you're ahead all the way. So, I did a lot of work around figuring out, how I was very troubled by what was happening with insurance and the stress that my patients were under in terms of, how much it was costing them, what insurance tells you to charge and what you can charge, and then what you get reimbursed, and the patient is the loser. So, so I wanted to just step out of that whole system. Best decision.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And for the person who's listening going like, I want a doctor like Dr. Rose Kumar, you work virtually, right? Yes,
I do. I work virtually with patients all over the country. So it's really lovely. I haven't met them, but they and I developed this relationship that's really, really lovely and very connected. So what I will do is I'll see somebody, from, say, California, and then we'll figure out how they can create an integrative team around themselves and their community. It's worked. So far, it's worked very well.
That's phenomenal.
So I think this is where medicine needs to go. I mean, integrative medicine that's done from this 4-body system process, that triage process is extremely powerful and curative for most things. Integrative medicine has gotten diluted in its definition, where, you can, a little bit of this and a little bit of that is not integrative medicine. So integrative medicine really approaches different levels of being a person, including their story and their, and it doesn't sacrifice good quality, high standard of care, medical diagnosis and treatment. It doesn't sacrifice that at all. It works at many levels. So I think that's really where people get tripped up, where they'll go to an integrative physician and they'll get like a bag full of supplements and then, do acupuncture and do this thing and that thing. And pretty soon they're $2,000 out and they're really taking too much stuff and they're not healing. It's not in alignment. So I think that people really need to do their homework and make sure that they understand what true integrative medicine is and how it can get to the root. And look, this is work. It's work for the patient. You know, this is not like, I'll tell you what to do and you take this and
Oh God, Rose, just give me the pill.
done. Yeah. It doesn't work that way. Life is a struggle. Life is hard work, but there's so much meaning in working towards health, working towards consciousness, working towards, alignment, and to seek to figure out, why am I here? And what is the point of my illness or symptom? And what can I do about it? I mean, and when people do that and start creating that change, it is the most empowering thing you can do for yourself. It's a very fulfilling way to do medicine and to have relationships with patients.
So much freedom.
A lot of freedom, much freedom and much joy. We celebrate the victories, the little victories and the transformations that are going on all the time. So
what's your favorite flower essence right now for you?
Right now, for me, it's full bloom. Because I'm ready. I'm ready for full bloom. And, again, the flower remedies are such that it's not like you're going to just bloom when you take full bloom. All the stuff that's in the way of your bloom is going to come up for you to work through. And that's pretty much what's going on with me since I started using the full bloom remedy, is that all of this junk is coming up that needs to be, cleared out and released out of my life so that I can, expand. I started with expansive presence, the elixir, and now I'm on the full bloom, and it's fascinating, what's happening in my life. It's very subtle. I can feel the softening of the hanging on, the calcifications inside. I can feel that softening. And there's, like I describe it to my patients as, the flower remedies have qualities to them that only Katie knows, because you're the expert there, and I trust what it says on the bottle, and it intuitively calls me. So say one of my patients is having a difficulty with self-hatred. Okay, so this has come up a lot recently, and shame. So there are two things that I gave her. One is infinite love, and the other was expansive presence. Because what was happening is she was constricted inside, and the predatory parts of her psyche were starting to take over her psyche and inhabiting it. And other things were getting crowded out, and she couldn't really hear herself. So this is a woman who's in her 60s and is struggling. So when she started taking the expansive presence, what started happening is that there was this softening of those calcified parts of self. They were subtly just getting softer, so she could access more and more the inner voice. So it took a while for her to build inertia with listening to that inner voice and connecting back in, so that when the shame was coming up, she was more able to observe it and to not get taken up by it, so that she would go to the refrigerator and start eating ice cream or something. So she had the ability to hold space for herself for even a few moments, to shift that, to create a space between herself and her shame. Wow. So that she was able to kind of be with the self that she could nourish herself in that space versus cramming stuff in her mouth. So it's subtle, but it's super powerful to be able to be assisted that way, because we don't have a system that supports that. So
I'm so grateful you're in Wisconsin recommending the flowers to people.
Oh, absolutely. They're basically flying off the shelf. It's you've created an amazing product that is, I feel connected to it. That's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is the mist, and then I put the oil on as many times a day as I can remember. But my water bottle has my remedies in it, my elixirs in it. Very powerful, very, very powerful. Again, the energy body, that subtle body it shows up in the emotional, mental, physical bodies. So it takes longer, when you take a remedy and you have to keep taking it, and it doesn't work as fast as a statin does or an antidepressant does, but it works at a deeper root level so that you don't need the medication.
Right.
And it's like what I find the remedy does is it brings up the inner wisdom, the awareness, the connection to consciousness. And it brings, so my patients will bring me insights after using the essences for a while. Can you believe I never understood that. And now all of a sudden I had this dream or I had this insight. And, I think that's the key. I mean, okay, this is good. This is one step closer to your transformation.
Wow.
It's very powerful. Very powerful.
Okay. Well, I hope many listeners make appointments with you. I feel so lucky.
I'm happy to help in whatever way I can.
I look forward to, as you know, a long and fruitful relationship and partnership with you in this life and beyond. And I'm just going to say that in the future, I'd love to have you on a podcast again. There's so many other things that we could talk about and so many things in your book that we could get into in terms of menopause and midlife and changes in women's lives. So we're going to have you on again soon.
Sounds great. I would love to be on.
In the meantime, Becoming Real, grab that book. And if you're out there listening, there's so much good information in the book. And then is there anything, Rose, that you want to share as like last words of wisdom, something you've been finding yourself telling people lately or something that just kind of comes to your heart?
Well, I just wrote this article, and if people want to read some of my writings on different topics that might be of interest, if you go to www.ommanicenter.com, OMMANI center.com, and just read my blog, there's recipes, there's so much information on that website. You could take months on it. But my latest blog is an article about self-gratification, ego gratification versus nourishment. What is the difference between the two? And so what I'd like to leave the listeners with is really reflect on that. What nourishes you? And really attend to that. Because I think for women, our relationship to ourself is wounded for most women. And the word love is very contaminated. When I tell a woman, you have to learn how to love yourself, they go, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. What is that? Because we know how to take care of other people. I'm last. So I've replaced the word love with nourishment and really work with what nourishes me, even if it's to take a 10-minute walk or stretch for 10 minutes or breathe for 10 minutes or eat a piece of the wee of chocolate for 10 minutes.
Chocolate's always a yes.
Even take the remedies, the flower remedies, LOTUSWEI remedies, mindfully, so that you're attending to these are nourishing remedies. You are nourishing yourself when you apply it on your skin, when you mist it around you, when you put it in your mouth. This is all self-nourishment. So take the time during the day to nourish yourself and try to see if there's a difference between your ego getting, its gratification versus your being nourished. And I think that there's a big difference between the two. And we need to attend more and more and more to self-nourishment, even if it's walking outside in your garden or smelling a flower or petting your dog or your cat or whatever it is. These are all self-nourishing. These are ways to nourish yourself. So I think if you can build a spiritual practice of self-nourishment, it's going to build over time, and that will become a way that you care for yourself. And so that is what I think we really need to practice. It's a skill that we have to develop, because that, in the final analysis, that's really all we have, is how do we take care of ourselves and what is our relationship to ourselves? Because then you can really nourish others truly, authentically, when you know how to do that for yourself. So that's my 2 words of wisdom to the women listening out there and the men listening out there, in terms of what I think could really assist in their journey.
Love it. So beautiful. Your work, your essence is so beautiful and wise.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you for having me on this podcast.
Thank you. See you again soon.
Take care. Love you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to The Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.